Hello, Charlotte.
Hi, Craig.
You can hear me good?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
I'm sitting in an eerie red light here, so
You do have a devilish glow about you.
yes, well, seems appropriate. All right. We're going to get started because we only have an hour from 3 or 4 minutes ago when I went live. So welcome everyone who's here, and thanks to Wines of Germany. We're going to be tasting some nice German wines today. Charlotte Burhoe is with me from Fredericton. I assume you're in
Oh,
Fredericton. You are in Fredericton right now, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah. I'm actually in Nova Scotia visiting family, so I picked up the wines that I'm tasting from Nova Scotia. So Charlotte got hers from the AMDL. So just a quick run through what we're doing. We're going to be tasting 6 wines, 3 each, and they're from different parts of Germany, mostly from a couple regions, and that's not because we personally don't believe in all those other regions, or it's just a reflection of what's available in our markets in the New Brunswick liquor and Nova Scotia liquor, and including some private stores we have in Nova Scotia. So, we're tasting what we can get that's at a reasonable value and good availability, which is important. So I'm just going to talk a little bit briefly about German regions, not getting into detail. There's quite a few regions, and if I'm going to put the my camera on flip so you can just sort of see. This is one of the maps typical to what we use in our song program when I took it, and I'm sure Charlotte has seen it in WSET. So the main regions that I've been to and tasted in are Rheingau, which you can sort of see is just above Rheinhessen there, around Wiesbaden and Mainz. Below Rheinhessen itself is a big wine region, lots of Riesling there. Below that is the Pfalz. We have quite a few from the Pfalz today, which is a reflection of what's available here. And of course, the Mosel, you see the river up there, the river valley that runs down. The Mosel Saar, that's where a lot of the best wines, I think, are in Germany. And certainly from my travels, some of the most beautiful scenery and vineyards that I've seen. Quite a few other regions. We're not going to go into them all. Those are kind of the ones we'll be tasting today. But there's a lot of diversity, a lot of different grapes and styles of wine. One of the misconceptions about German wine is that it's all sweet, and certainly not true. A lot of what we get in North America does tend to be of the off dry, especially the Rieslings. But in the truth, and what I learned from traveling there is that the Germans actually prefer dry wines, even though they do make a lot of stunning dessert wines, particularly from Riesling. And they also drink more red wine than white wine, particularly Pinot Noir is big. Not all from Germany, although it's the biggest production red grape in Germany by far. Um, they love red wine and they drink a lot of red wine. So yeah, there's a little misconception there about that Germans sit around drinking sweet Riesling all the time, which is so not true. So that's a couple things. We'll talk more about different grapes and stuff as we go and taste. So I'm going to taste the first wine that's in our tasting, and then we'll alternate from then on. I'll give Charlotte a chance to say whatever she wants about wines or her wines or wines of Germany in general. But yeah, big thank you to Wines of Germany for having us do this. It's an honor and a privilege, and I love German wine. So my first wine, I'm going to just show you the bottle, is here. Dr. Pauli Bergweiler. It's the 2017 Riesling Trocken. And for those of you who are a little bit knowledgeable or about German wine, know that Trocken means dry. And that goes back to that, what I was just saying, that yeah, we get a lot of off-dry wines, but Trocken is very popular, and there's a lot of regions that have a history of dry wines. The Rheingau in particular is well known for it, but there's in every region you'll see it. And so this Dr. Pauli Bergweiler Trocken I actually visited this winery a few years ago with a couple of my wine judge friends and writers, John Zabo and Bill Zackerque, and we visited a whole bunch of great wineries in the Mosel area and down Sauer as well. And we did visit Bergweiler, and it was a nice visit. It's beautiful, historic. It's in Bern Castle, which has incredible architecture, and it's right where the elbow of the river is and winds down through. And when you go up on the top of the hill, you look at these vineyards that go on forever. Just gorgeous. And mostly what we were drinking at that time, when we were doing verticals of single vineyard wines, like I think we basically stuck to Spätlese or Auslese to really get the feel for a vineyard over a long period of time. You know, vintages going back 20 years or whatever. But the Trocken style is, you know, really a big sellers for them, and this is their Trocken Riesling. They're mostly Riesling drinkers. Something's making Charlotte laugh. I hope it's not my wine tasting, not my wine tasting technique, I hope.
No, it's the cat.
But very mineral driven, kind of lemon, lime, green apple. But you know, a lot of people would smell this wine and go and think they're going to get a juicy, sweet mouthful, and you don't. It's quite dry. Now, when they say Trocken in Germany, it may not be quite as necessarily bone dry like an Alsace Riesling, or in like in Canada when they make reserve dry Rieslings. Trocken can have a bit of sugar in it, and then there's Trocken, which is like kind of in between, a little bit sweeter, and then there's fine herb where they fine tune the sweetness to match the acid and try to make a balanced wine. But this style, you know, it's very much for food and still refreshing as a drink, but I think it's a great food wine, whereas the more off-dry ones are more for sipping or for specific types of food. So yeah, it's very nice, and it's around just over $20 at the NSLC. So what do you have for your first one, Charlotte?
Well, for my first one, ironically, all the wines that I picked are from the Pfalz region. There are a few here in New Brunswick that are from the other regions, but it just happened that I wanted kind of a different selection. So, and kind of go for the ones that maybe people hadn't tried before. And I actually picked a Dr. Zenzen Schroebe, and it's an interesting wine for sure. You can pick it up at AMBL for $24.99 currently, and it's in a few different stores. And I know that you have a wine that you'll talk about later from Dr. Zenzen as well, which will be interesting. So I didn't want to pick, you know, the same reason that you were also going to be having from him. And one of the things I just wanted to touch on with what you were saying about the Trocken and the Hoftrocken, I find it's really interesting in terms of the words that they use, like whether it's cabinet, Spotlese, Auslese, Baron Auslese, and that those just mean like the ripeness of the grapes. So it's important to kind of see that word along with the word Trocken to know that, oh, well, it was a really ripe grape, but it's still dry wine. So I just think that those are like interesting things, and that's why I find that some people are really confused about wine labels, and they don't necessarily want to branch out because they don't know what they're going to be getting. But this Schroebe it's a nice light lemon color. It has a little green hue to it, but not too much. Now, aromatic wise, it's there, but it's not overly complex. You're getting some citrus, you're getting some peach, some apricot, a little bit of like those honey notes, but not what you would think be like, oh, this is going to be syrupy. And so when you're tasting it, it's a much fuller wine. It's soft. It's got good acidity to it, but it's still a soft wine. It's very easy drinking. It would be one of those that'd be great for a greeting wine. You could have it after dessert or after dinner as an aperitif or a digestive. I think it would hold up to a lot of foods, even spicy foods on this one. So I think it would be a good choice and would be really interesting for someone who might like a sweeter style of wine to try out as, you know, okay, I'm not going to be shocked with this, but at the same time, it's not sweet in that it's off-putting. It's got enough acidity that balances it, but again, the taste profile of it is not overly complex, which is kind of from Schroebe is one of those grapes where it was mass produced in Germany years and years ago, and then people just kind of stopped drinking it because it was just like a classic kind of table wine. But they actually make really interesting wines, and they go from things that are really dry with crisp grapefruit flavors right up to the dessert botrytis style wines. Couldn't say that word. Um, so this one I find is like in that in between. I don't think there's any Botrytis Noble Rot happening on this particular wine. I don't get that taste that's familiar when you have something that's Botrytis, but it definitely is not a dry, crisp wine either.
Right.
It's good. I would buy it again. Have it by the pool.
Yeah, I've had that wine. I think it's quite nice. And I remember when I first had Charaiba, I think it was when I was visiting in Germany at Lingenfelder, which I think you're going to be tasting later. And he was the one who was trying to get me to pronounce it properly. It's very hard. But then
I know, I was working on that.
like Charaiba. If you go, they used to, I don't know if they still, but they used to have on the Lingenfelder website, they used to have audio of different wine writers from around the world saying the grape's name to try to teach people. Kind of funny.
That's fun.
Yeah. All right. That sounds, I mean, I know
excellent. Some people have wine they like it.
Oh, good. That's nice. No, it's interesting. And some of these grapes, I mean, we know that that Germany is kind of king or queen, depending on how you look at it. In Germany, Riesling is like 23% of total plantings. Then you got Müller-Thurgau, which is more for bulk wines. And then you got your Pinot Noir, which they call Spätburgunder, then Dornfelder. You have to keep really going down the list to find some of the other ones that we're trying today, like Charaiba is 16th.
Yeah.
So, you know, Germany is really dominated by a specific grape. So.
I was reading that it's like under 2% of this grape is grown in Germany right now. And that most of the plantings are most common in the Palatine, the Pfalz region. Right.
It's kind of neat that we actually got that one in New Brunswick, in my opinion. I love trying different wines.
It is.
And it's quite a tasty wine. They're actually growing a bit of that in Nova Scotia here, believe it or not. At Lightfoot and Wolfel, I think, has made it didn't taste anything. Yes,
they are.
It didn't taste anything like that wine that you're having or the ones I've had from Lingenfelder or other German producers, but it was a very nice wine, and it had the aromatics. It just didn't have any of the textural similarity. So very cool. So shall I move on to my second wine here, I guess?
Yes.
We'll have plenty of time for talking about stuff and maybe answering questions if anybody. You're better at seeing questions being asked than I am. I'm watching for it. But here's my second wine, which if there's any of my fellow students that took this on with me or after me from Adam Dial, or even more recently that took it from me or took it from Carmen and Mark and Simon in Nova Scotia, that this wine often is always part of the German part of the course, because this is the Dr. Zen 20, this is the 2017, but I'm talking about all the older vintages we've had over the years, the Riesling Spätlese. So it's a Moselle Riesling by a very big producer. Like Zen is they're one of the biggies, but this is a testament to the grape, I think. I mean, they're a big winery, but they know how to make quality wine, and it may not be really expensive. It's only $22, and it's not one of those cult wineries or the famous ones that everybody goes, oh, you have to go visit when you're in the Mosel. But I've had this wine so many times over the years. I think when I took the SOM program in 99, we were probably drinking an 85, and that it was at the NSLC for, I think at the time it was like $15. Like, and it was quite an eye opener for me as I was more came from the beer background more, but then was really getting into wine. That you could buy a wine that was that much aged and that complex and delicious and only pay that much money. And that was part of what, I mean, I've already liked Riesling because I had lived in Ontario for a while, so I'd gotten into that style, but this was kind of an eye opener for me, these. And it's one of those wines that it's a go-to for me. I always know it's a safe buy. So this is
Right.
the 17. So unfortunately, they're not carrying a very old vintage at the moment. I think it just depends on how fast they go through stock, and then what they can get and what's available on the market in the world market. But it's interesting. Actually, all the ones I have today are 2017s, which just like your faults thing, it wasn't a planned thing. It is. It's what happened. So this wine, I know this wine gets really golden with age, but now it's probably hard to see there, but it's still quite pale, that kind of you know a pale yellow. It hasn't reached a gold or even a darker yellow. It's still young. Nose wise, it's very classic Riesling, German Riesling nose with apple and some of the minerality that makes me think that with age it will get a bit of that complexity that the British, I think, are the ones who started calling it petrol, but it doesn't smell like gas like when you pump gas. It's just a mineral kind of I think a sulfur based kind of aromatic that I find very pleasing, and I think a lot of wine people do. And Riesling is one of the grapes that really tends to develop it. There are others, but certainly I find some people, and when I'm doing events, that don't love that classic character. But most
Hmm.
people, I think, either they really enjoy it or they learn as they learn more about wine, they learn to enjoy it.
Right.
Mm. Now this is a Spätlese, so as you were talking about before, the ripeness level that you can take a Spätlese and ferment it right out dry, and then you've got a fuller bodied, dry, higher alcohol wine that's probably good for drinking with food. But this is sort of the off dry style,
Hmm.
so stopped fermentation, so it's very fruity and has some sweetness, but it's only 9% alcohol. It's like a cider on that level. Some ciders anyway, but it's really rich and unctuous, and it's surprising how balanced it is. I'm not sure what the exact sugar is, but I'm sure there's a lot of sugar in there, but the Riesling signature acid balances out this wine. It's
Right.
I find it's really a joy to drink, and I know you can enjoy it with from personal experience with spicy cuisine. But I'm of a mind that when I get this wine, especially if it's been aged even longer, I just want to drink it and just taste it and enjoy it. And there's
So
not
you're
many
saying
wines that
it's good without food?
well, there's not many wines that you can pay $20 for and know that you can lay it down for 20 years and it's going to be amazing. So,
Hmm.
you learn when you work in a market like you work, which wines that can do that, once you've been tasting for quite a few years so that's why I call them the go-tos, the ones that
Right.
not only will you always use them for events because they're going to show what you want to teach, but also they're going to be good, and that for your own purchasing, what you're getting into. So anyway, it's an old favorite for a reason, and Adam Dial was my SOM instructor. So shout out to Adam if he's watching now or after we put the saved version of this video online, get some more eyes to it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I should recap on the first wine that I had and let people know what year it was if they didn't have it. So this was the 2015. So there are some maybe riper notes, but not a lot of bottle aging notes. Like I didn't get any nuttiness and those kind of things from it. But moving into the second wine, again, not again, but like Craig, I'm doing a Riesling. Now, this one is very common within New Brunswick. It's the Langenfelder Bird Riesling. And this would be my go-to wine if I'm picking up a Riesling in the store and I want to please everybody. It's 29, so $20. And it's one of those wines that when you think about the winery and things, the winemaker, who I believe Craig has a personal relationship with him, has met him, Rayner. He works on the premise of low intervention on his winery and looks to express the terroir through the grapes and minimal intervention. And it's one of those wines that they don't use any like clarifying or stabilizing agents in it. So you can get some bottle variation when you pick up one of these, but it's not a bottle variation that you're going to be like, what am I drinking? And I also wanted to say thank you to Wines of Germany, because I realized I didn't say that earlier. And again, it's a true pleasure to be doing this talk on wines from Germany to kind of create awareness for folks. And I do know right now they're also doing another kind of contest until the end of the month, I believe. It was like a 31 Riesling contest, 31 days of Riesling. And if you take a picture of yourself drinking your Riesling, which if you're on this call, y'all have some Riesling, and you post it to Instagram and you tag them with the hashtag and tag Wines of Germany, you can be entered in to win, I think it's a Wines of Germany bicycle, which would be kind of cool. Yeah. And so I'm drinking this 2018 Langenfelder Bird Label Riesling. Again, it's about $20 that you pick up from AMBL. And it's one of those, as soon as you smell it, it kind of gives you those notes that are like, I'm drinking a Riesling. Now, is that something that everyone loves? I think they should. I was part of a call the other night, and it was mentioned that maybe they were like, what would a wine snob pick? And somebody mentioned Riesling, and I was like, I do not consider myself a wine snob at all. I will drink pretty much anything. But I enjoy these because they're so complex. You can get so many different flavors from them, so many different aromas. And if you like that when you sit down for your food and all the food flavors that are coming at you, then that's why you're going to like a Riesling too, because you get all of that in a glass. So the aromas on this, I get the petrol, I get like some citrus, but it's not a whole lot. Sorry, I'm going to cough here. But there's like some unique aromas to it, some like elderflower, and it's got those like lemon rinds to it, like that, almost not candied rinds, but like the really ripe lemon peels to them. It's tangy. You get those stone fruit notes like nectarine in it as well. And again, on the taste, you're getting like more of a richer feel. It's in that medium bodied range, pushing to maybe a bit fuller, but it has that acidity that backs it up. So again, although this one would be classified as an off dry, so it would definitely have some residual sugar in it. The acidity is so well balanced that you don't notice that you're drinking a sweet wine. But the people who like ripe fruits and a little bit sweeter wine are going to enjoy this. And the people who like that crispness back end are also going to enjoy something like this as well. So I think that those are really interesting ways, and that, you know, the winemaker, as I've always said, is a magician, and they can take that harvest and decide what they're going to be producing from it. And I just think it might be one of the most amazing jobs outside of what you and I do, Craig, to have.
No, you're right that I did visit Langenfelder well, he's very popular in Atlantic Canada. He has been for years, the wines. I'm hoping that's still the case. It certainly was at the time I visited them, and it's very nice folks. We stayed at their winery there when I was traveling with my family. And what was interesting was to taste all the the single vineyard wines and
Mhm.
and Pinot Noir and Gamay and premium Dornfelder and all these things. Like we're used to the Bird label and some of the other larger volume wines, but they're actually not a big high volume winery.
No,
I think when you look at that Bird label, reason you think, oh, this is from a big producer, but it
yeah,
isn't.
they
It's
only
just
produce
wine.
like 13,000 cases a year
Yeah,
through their winery. So that's in the size of wineries. That's not a big winery.
no, I think it's because it was a brand that they created. I think in the early days it might have been for the English market, perhaps. I'm not sure, but
And it's a
it's
fun one
really
with
it's a beautiful label. And
cool
they've had other ones. They had a fish label one and another
and
one.
a fox
That,
label and a
yes,
hair label, which I think
that's
hair
right.
is the
But
Gewürz.
when you're there, you get to taste the single vineyard ones that are right up, close to there. You can go up and walk around and
Mhm.
near the winery. And uh, I've I found that their wines in general were excellent, but certainly that low intervention thing was something. This was, sheesh, 14 years ago, I think, when I was there. And at the
Mhm.
time, there wasn't all that much talk, at least in my wine circles, of natural wine and low intervention wines and such things.
Right.
But I remember Reiner, we were in the winery and he's showing me this tank. And so, oh, this is my whatever vineyard, I forget which one it was, Riesling, but it's from, and it was like 8 years before. He'd already released the wines from the years ensuing, except for maybe the most recent. But he still had that. But he said, "Yeah, it's still not where I want it yet." And I went, "Oh, okay. Now I understand when you're using indigenous yeast and just letting it happen, and you're trying to get to a certain wine style or wine profile, and if it's not there yet, I mean, you can either release it as is or you can wait."
You hold it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so that was
And
an
you think like they don't make money until they produce that wine and somebody buys it. So that's
right.
quite the investment to have and commitment to have to a wine industry.
Yeah, I wonder if I wrote it down what year. I mean, because I'd love him to explain, when did they actually release it and how
Right.
was it? How did it go? But that was cool.
Yeah. Do
No,
you want
that's
to
one of
go to
my.
your next one?
Yeah, I was to say that is one of my favorite. I buy a lot of Bird Label, and I have ever since we've got it. And
Well, I think during one of my CAPS courses that either yourself or Mark DeWolf was teaching, um, this was one of the wines that was used.
right, it makes sense. So yeah, my third wine. I've had two Riesling so far: a
Hmm.
Trocken, the Dr. Pauli Bergweiler, and then the Dr. Zenzen Spätlese Riesling. I mean, you taste. I was tasting those back and forth, and the Trocken, of course, tastes extra Trocken when you have it after an off dry wine, and they both taste like Riesling, but wow, they're different. They're so different. And I think the Bird label is probably closer to the Zenzen, but maybe not as sweet.
Right.
So my third one is from a different grape, and it's from a different region. I'll show the label here. It's a wine I had never had before. This is Kurt Darding is a winemaker winery in the Pfalz, and this is the Gewürztraminer Cabinet, and it's from a specific vineyard. You can see there, it may be hard to read, the Durkheimer Nonnengarten in the Pfalz. And again, it's a 2017, as all my wines are today. Um, I've never had this wine before. I picked it up at the NSLC. It's about $25. There's not a huge amount of it. They have some at a couple of the stores, but there's enough for people to pick it up. It's interesting. The Darding family they were one of these ones that were just wine growers for many years. Like they go back to the 1700s, and it's only recently, like in the last 30 years, that they started making their own wine, and that's interesting. Trying to perhaps take more control and then make more money, I guess, and provide more jobs for the generations of the family. But they're in the Pfalz, in a town called or region called Bad Dürkheim, and I think I've actually been there, but I didn't go to this winery. It's south of Rheinhessen. Um, And the faults, which I think you alluded to a little bit already, is quite different climatically than the Mosel or Rheingau and even Rheinhessen, and that it is getting, it seems to be a bit warmer. There's more red varieties than a lot of other regions. You see quite a range of grape varieties. It's not just like all Riesling, like some of the regions you look at are so dominated by Riesling. Like, for example, the Mosel is 91% white wine, and a large chunk of that is Riesling. Whereas the Pfalz, which is also called the Palatinate, is it's got 36% red, which is fairly big for Germany, and most of that is Dornfelder, which is a red grape that we don't really see very much, although there's been a little bit made in Canada, but I believe it has Gamay in its parentage, and it's kind of a Gamay-like, maybe a little heavier than Gamay when grown in a good climate. But if you even look on the list of grapes for the Pfalz, you don't really see Gewürztraminer high up there, even though it's recognized as a traditional grape from the Pfalz. And like your Scheurebe, it's pretty low down in the, if you look at all of Germany, only 0.8% of total grape vineyard is Gewürztraminer. So I'm with Gewürz, I'm one of those people that I love it sometimes, and other times it kind of annoys me. Like if it's a certain style, if it's so overtly fat, fruity, and floral, and then doesn't have acidity or crispness, then sometimes I find it a bit tiresome on the palate. But I was in Alsace a few years ago, and the top Gewürz there are definitely not tiresome. Like, they're complex and amazing. But in Canada, we have quite a bit grown, and it's hard to find one that actually smells and tastes like Gewürztraminer. But if you're in Alsace or Germany, when you buy Gewürztraminer, it's going to smell like Gewürztraminer. It's going to have the floral, it's going to have the lychee and other tropical fruit. And I'm expecting that. I actually haven't even smelled this wine yet, but I would be shocked if it doesn't. It's so obvious. Like, this is the kind of wine that, when you're taking your SOM exam, you're like, please be a Gewürztraminer. I want full marks for one of the wines. So it's definitely got that kind of rose petal tropical fruit, which
excellent
to me is very classic. Gewürz
sorry,
is
so far away.
It's all right. Gewürz
Can you
is
bring
a
me
low.
one of those bottles back?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I probably could. There's some still at the NSLC. So it's Gewürz is known for being low acid, full bodied. So they tend to make it in a fairly high alcohol sometimes. This one isn't, though. This is 11%. So it says a Cabernet, which is the lowest ripeness in the ripeness scale. But of course, the question is then, how did they make this wine? Did they make it as a off dry or sweet Cabernet, or did they ferment it dry? The 11% makes me think it's going to be a bit sweet. Of course, you can't tell from the nose, which is one of the first lessons we teach in the wine programs, is you can't smell sugar. Or you can sometimes smell something that might make you think something is sweet, but then you could be completely wrong. So yeah, it's fruity, but
5%.
it is quite sweet. So it's being made in that, I would call it the sipping style of Gewürztraminer, almost cocktail-like. It's actually got a little bit of a pétillance too. You could see it if probably too difficult with the camera. You'd have to get really close up. But there's some bubbles forming. It's a 2017, so it's still a fairly young wine.
Okay.
But I can definitely feel a little bit of the pétillance. Now it's big, round, smooth, low acid, relatively. But it's unmistakably Gewürztraminer. I would probably, again, drink this as kind of a cocktail, but it could handle hot food for sure. Um,
Hmm.
we know that a bit of sweetness can sometimes kill heat. It usually does, and unless the wine is so high in alcohol that you end up getting a burn from alcohol. But in this case, we're not in that situation. So
Hmm.
it's nice. I mean, I would recommend it for sure. And the fact that we don't have a lot of cohorts in the market, and that includes Alsace, which is odd because back uh, I remember when I first started buying wine, and I was living in Ontario in the early 90s, and the Gewürztraminer was quite popular
Well, I
in the
think that's
French
all we
section.
have in AMBL right now is Canadian Gewurz. I
Yeah,
don't think there's any from another market
yeah,
unless it's not been labeled specifically that.
yes, and I've asked about it, and they have said that they have difficulty selling premium Alsace wines in New Brunswick. So, I mean,
Comes with
I've tried to,
education.
yeah, I've tried to help, and I'll continue to poke at them. And they did actually get a few in recently, but just to the experience store. But I don't know if there was any good words, but they got some really
Yeah.
nice premium Alsace wines. And there's always going to be more interesting German wines at the experience store in Moncton than there would be out in the general stores. Normally, they always have something there, and I think this wine at the price $25. I think the people who love Gewürztraminer, if somebody's really into Gewürztraminer or Gewürz as
They'll
we
buy
like to
it.
call it, they want Gewürztraminer, and they want something that when they buy it, they're looking for that specific aroma and taste profile. So this hits it. So
Does that one
on
have
that
any
level.
spicy notes to it?
It's not particularly, I know, yeah, sometimes you do get a bit of almost like a ginger kind of thing, or yeah. I think you could argue there's a little bit there, but doesn't jump out at me like some of the dry Alsatian versions, which I think possibly when they're fermented dry, maybe you get more of the phenolics from the skin, perhaps, for skin contact. But like I say it's a nice wine. It's really nice. Um, all three of my wines are good, and they're probably for different purposes. But that's what we love about wine, isn't it?
It is.
And I think you have one more there, don't you?
I do. And I want to touch base on you were talking about the geography of Germany and the different regions. And it would be super great to be able to line up a Riesling that was considered, whatever grapes, like, so cabinet, and then right straight across the line from all the
Yeah.
different places and do like a lineup of that. I feel like that would be something I'd be all over. Um, and then you mentioned that Pfalz kind of has like that different climatic area. And that's one of the things I think that when I was doing my studies that I loved about Germany was that it continues, but it's like Alsace with the Vosges, and then all of a sudden you get to Pfalz and it's over here, but the Hadar Mountains are on the other side, so it creates that rain shadow and all that protecting
Hmm.
from like the western climate coming in. And it gives you that more sun, but then they have to worry about drought happening. And so that's
Right.
why a lot of the vineyards are practicing more biodynamic things and looking at because they're trying to like capture all this like the moisture in the soil and things. Um, my next wine, obviously, being from Pfalz, because I said all three of mine were from there. And I went down to the experience store, and I know this was in the experience through AMBL, and it was available, but currently it's only available in the experience store. And I got this one, and it is Ray Kenderman. Now, the thing about Ray Kenderman, um, they own a lot of different wine brands, and they come under different, I guess, I'll call them tiers. This one happens to be in their terroir level. So when they're talking about terroir, this bottle, if you look at it, it doesn't say terroir on it anywhere. But if you're looking for that wine, unless you know what you're like typing in, or if you've done like a vast or a broad search, you won't necessarily find it, because what people might not know is that at the bottom it says Vom Kalkamagerl, because Kalkamagerl is the soil that the wine's grown in, and it's the limestone marl, and that's what that word means in Germany. So I found that was interesting once I picked it up because I have had some of their Rieslings from this winery as well. And it says Vom Los, Loss, I think is how they say it.
Yeah, Los,
And
I
I
think. Yeah.
always thought that was interesting because I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, it's their terroir. That's what they're trying to tell you from this label is that this is what I want to tell you, that this is why I'm making this wine because I'm focusing on the terroir driven aspect of it. This one that I have today is a Trocken, and it's a 2014. So we'll give that one a try. And again, the color on this, it's not your traditional ruby color that you're expecting from other areas with Pinot Noir. This definitely has like that garnet brick note to it. It's like, to me, it's really interesting. But still, on the nose, you're getting everything typical for the Pinot Noir. You're getting those like cherry, the red currant. You're getting a little bit darker, a little bit more dried fruit almost into it, like a red currant, like a black currant almost. Because this one, I feel like it does show some bottle aging, not a lot, but on the taste, that acidity is there, but the tannins are still, they're present, but they're still mild, which is exactly what you're expecting. And it's got like this little bit of like a chocolate note to it, which I'm like, oh, hello. I'm glad I ended with you.
I had that wine. I don't know, a few weeks ago or a month ago. I thought it was really nice.
But it's got like one thing I find when I drink a German Pinot Noir, it usually has an earthiness to it that I don't necessarily associate to find that's really interesting because if I'm given a choice and specifically looking at even price points and I'm like, oh, you can have this, or I'm like, oh, but that's a German Pinot Noir. I'll probably take that because I always find that they have a little bit more depth, a little bit more characteristic to them, even when they're younger.
Right. You know, a lot of people don't know about German Pinot, or they're not aware how
Got
important it is.
Lacey? No, no. What's the word? Spenden? That's the word. I'm looking at my friend across the table here.
Oh,
I can never say it though.
I don't know. I just remember when I experienced really good German Pinot Noir visiting there. I've been there a few times on, writer trips, and once with a group of sommeliers, and we went to the producer of the
Right?
current top Pinot of their competition, and it was like blew me away how good the Pinot Noir was. I'm like, we never really thought too much of it, but in
That
truth,
Burgunder.
it's a big deal in Germany. Spätburgunder is almost 12% of acreage in
Yes.
Germany.
And so I always find, and I always like, because I translate everything into my head, then I'm like, I can see the word, but I can't necessarily articulate the word.
Yeah. No, it's
But yeah, so I would always, like, given that choice, if you're looking at things that are at the same price point, I'm going to choose a German Pinot Noir if it's available to me. Just because I like those more rustic, earthy notes. It
hmm
still has that cherry and the red fruit notes to it, but then it seems to be a little bit, like I said, more complex, even though it's a bit younger.
right. Do you think the food wise you would treat it similar to how you would treat like a pretty good Burgundy?
I do,
hmm
but at half the price.
Yeah, I know the Germans, they drink a lot of Burgundy because they don't make enough red wine for themselves. But I would like to think that if they did make more Pinot Noir, and I think it is trending upwards as I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Now, I do
Well,
know at the
red grape.
experience
Yeah.
store, there are a couple other, I was going to say there are a couple other selections of Pinot Noir down there.
From Germany.
And I
Yeah.
picked this one specifically because I knew that label and I knew
Yes.
that the things I'd had from that winery before I really enjoyed. But there were a few other selections down there. So definitely you mentioned like our experience store in Moncton and that they have a bit more of a selection. And I agree. They have a little area and they have different ones. They have different levels and quality levels of Rieslings. And they had Sylvaner and a couple other Pinot Noirs as well. And they, I believe, even had a white Pinot Noir. So
Yeah.
Pinot Blanc, sorry.
Well, they definitely have, I mean, some really
To like
premium,
still champagne.
they have some single vineyard German Riesling there, yeah. And down here in Nova Scotia, the port is the fancy store for the NSLC, and they always have some interesting wines from everywhere. And then you also have some of the private stores like Bishop Cellar, and then the other ones that will bring in really interesting wines sometimes. And if you're into specific regions or looking for more oddball things, then it's nice to have stores like those that you can perhaps ask, see if they can
Right.
source stuff for you. And I think that move, to a premium store in Moncton, hopefully we'll see them all over New Brunswick. But I like the idea of having a special store to get special wines. It's it's a
Now,
progress.
this coming Friday, they'll actually be, I believe, opening their specialty store in PEI as well.
Oh, very good. Oh, that's nice. Well, we're getting fairly near the end of our hour here. I think we've tasted all the wines and maybe
We have.
gone back
Did
and
you have a
tasted them
favorite
twice.
out of the three?
Out of my three, definitely the Zen Zen Spätlese. It's like tasting an old friend. It's like I remember this wine, and it's quite interesting. There is a lot of vintage variation historically in some of these areas, but this wine always has signature things that I recognize, and um, I guess that's the sign of when they know what they're doing, they know how to make that wine. They've been making it for a long time. I really
Hmm.
like the texture of the wine and the balance, and the low alcohol is kind of nice too. It's a great wine for just sipping for enjoyment, and it has quite a bit of complexity for the price. And I know if I bought a case of this, there's plenty of it and there's always a bunch at NSLC. I know if I bought a case, I could drink a bottle a year for 12 years and not worry about them going off. So how about you? What about from your three?
Well, I find where I was trying the different grapes, it's hard to pick my favorite, but I mean, I love Pinot Noir. So, and the fact that we rarely get a German Pinot
Yeah,
Noir here, I really enjoy that. But again, as I mentioned previously when I was drinking it, the Langenfelder is kind of like my go-to Riesling when I pick it up off the shelf, just because I know exactly what I'm getting. There are
yeah,
some that are more dry for sure, um, but I don't mind this off dry one.
yeah. I've asked over the years both Lingenfelder himself and also the AMBL to bring in some, not more, but bring in some of their vineyard designated wines, their QMP wines.
Mhm.
But it just never happened, and it's one of those things. It's tricky sometimes where I've seen some of them in Ontario, and I've had them when I've gone to German wine shows in Toronto, where I've said, "Oh my gosh, you guys have the Lingenfelder, including their red." And I think at one point they had their traditional method sparkling as well, which is quite a wine. But sometimes the economics or the market are not there for certain wines, and I find it hard to accept as a lover of
Right.
these wines and as somebody who's trying to make a career as a wine professional in this region. I don't want to leave, but you know, when they have had GL wines for however many years, I don't even know, that bird label's been here, and yet they can't get the next year. It kind of is. It's. I wish they would get it, and even if it was just through the experience program, and then we could see if how people respond to them, maybe use them for a tasting. But anyway, that's something
I'm
to
going to
hope for
try that
the
fancy
future.
thing you did when you reversed your screen
Yeah, you can do it. It works.
and show my labels here. Let's see if it works. There they are. Do you see them?
Yeah. Yep. No, I really like that Pinot Noir. I remember it well. It's an odd label, very, but I
Very
like it.
new age.
Yes, I like the label.
So I was trying
No,
not to
I
make
haven't.
everybody dizzy because I actually had to move my camera.
I've seen a lot of people that have been waving and they're watching, but I haven't seen any specific questions. So just sort of
No, I
comments
don't think
from
there
people.
was. I think people just chimed in. A few people said that they had certain of the wines that I saw anyway.
Yeah.
And I have a couple people here drinking the wines as well.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm sure that some people here will drink these wines when I'm finished as well.
Excellent.
Um, I've converted my, well, I
There's
didn't
also
really.
a cat.
I didn't really have to convert my wife to a Riesling drinker because when we lived in Ontario, she actually kind of got into Ontario wine a little before me because I was really getting involved in homebrewing at the time, and I was certainly drinking wine, and but she got into it, took a wine course, you know, and so she's been drinking Ontario Riesling for as long as I have. So,
Yeah.
and German Riesling, she loves it as well, and I mean, she'd probably be happy if I just brought home only Riesling for white wine, and well, she probably wouldn't complain.
Right. And I
Yeah.
guess I know that we're nearing our end of the hour. And I just,
Yes.
again, personally want to say thank you to Wines of Germany for sponsoring the two of us to talk about it. We're spanning a couple different provinces right now joining this. And chance it. Go out and buy something from Germany and give it a try because you can be surprised. If you go into the stores at AMBL, talk to the product reps because they can help guide you based on what you do like.
Yes. And I think the Pinot Noir thing is something that, well, there's two things that need to be gotten rid of in terms of fake stereotypes. You know, the only all German wine is sweet. So
It's
people need
not.
to learn their way out of that stupid hole. And then the other one is that, you know, that you don't get good red wine from Germany or full red wines, but you certainly do. I mean, and I think we will see more, I hope. But yeah, check out your local stores and, you know, ask for things. Sometimes it has to start at a grassroots level, like when there are wine. I know there are wine collectors out there who are super into to German wines, and certainly amongst the sommelier community, anyone who took the Somm program from Adam Dial, if they didn't walk out of there a Riesling lover, I would be highly surprised. So even if they came in not liking it at all, I think they all walked out loving German Riesling, and I think that maybe that's an indication of the complexity of the wine sometimes that they'll continue to grow on you, perhaps. But either way,
Hmm.
it's my favorite white wine region in the world is uh, is Germany, particularly for aged white wines. So I'll give it my endorsement for sure.
Absolutely.
Anyway, we should
Perfect.
probably sign off.
And false for red. I was saying the
Yeah,
false region for red.
false is good for red. Yeah, there's a
Cheers,
few
Craig.
others too, but yeah. All right, cheers. And again, thanks, Wine of Germany. And everyone out there, we'll see you again at a future event or tasting. So take
Thank you
care.
for joining us. Thanks, Wines of Germany. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.